Hello and welcome to a mini episode of the Shift Your Day Job podcast. And Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. No matter what you're celebrating, I hope you are enjoying your time this holiday season, hopefully with people you love, even if that's just yourself. In this mini episode, I wanted to talk about some things that I learned from reading another book, because, that's just how I roll. I recently listened to The Gap and the Gain by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. I've already referenced a Benjamin Hardy book in the past. So, of course, I went back and listened to more of his content. And I just love how easy it is to follow. They're also pretty simple concepts that he elaborates on and shares stories about, and just really makes it super relatable. So, here's a question for you to ponder. Have you ever felt like you're constantly falling short, even when you're making progress? I know I do it all the time. I often don't see my wins. I know a lot of times I've given the advice of celebrate your small wins. And that is something that I have to remind myself to practice often. I do think I'm getting better at it. One inspiration that I have is my little nephew. I have a video of him where he does something really simple and then he cheers, I did it. And that has just stuck with me. So oftentimes when I celebrate a win, no matter how small, I say out loud to myself, I did it. And it really does lift my spirits, and it helps ingrain in my brain that I have done something. I have made progress, and there are signs of success showing up. As human beings, we have a tendency to measure ourselves against other people, against what society says, what we see in social media, in media in general. And that's when we start feeling like we don't measure up. It's when we're in that comparison. And the book, The Gap and the Gain, reveals a powerful mindset shift that can transform how you see your progress and ultimately how you see your life. So when we're in the gap, we're focusing on what we don't have and how far we are from the ideal. And it's interesting to think about, where does this ideal even come from? In a career aspect, if you have been in a career that you think for some reason you thought, this is just how it is, this is the way it should be, my parents did this, so I have to do this job. Where does that come from? And is that mindset serving you? Or are you just miserable because you're living up to somebody else's expectations, right? So, a lot of times when we focus on what we're lacking, it's a recipe for disappointment and frustration. Another example of living in the gap might be comparing your current situation to, for instance, when I was teaching, I often looked around at other teachers and thought, man, they just love their job and they look like they know what they're doing and that they love it. And here I am just feeling like I'm floundering all the time, feeling like I'm always falling short, and feeling like I'm never doing enough as a teacher, but comparing myself and imagining or projecting this idea onto others of, oh, they got it figured out, but what's wrong with me? Why don't I love what I'm doing? And so it's really easy to fall into the gap, and it's only natural. But our goal is to recognize those moments and get into the gain. So let's talk about that. The gain is when you measure backward, focusing on how far you've come instead of how far you have to go. It's a gratitude driven approach to growth. So, our job isn't to measure ourselves against other people or other ideals. It's to measure ourselves by ourselves, to measure our own personal growth, to look back on our life and the things that have happened and to reflect on how our actions got us to where we are today. And one of the things that I really loved from the book was talking about how we get to choose what our past means to us. For instance, let's say that you got fired from a job and that job made you miserable anyway. But getting fired was like icing on the cake. It was like, man, this was a horrible experience. And then you fired me. Like, I should have quit. And we can look back at that experience as it was so awful. I can't believe it went down like that. I lost my job for X amount of months and didn't have anything lined up after. And it was such a hard time. And maybe in that moment, that rang true to you. But now you're on the other side and you're in a pretty good place. And you can look back on that situation and reframe it and decide, you know what? That was a great learning experience for me. I'm really grateful that I went through that because I learned what I do not want in a job. I learned to get out of a job that makes me miserable before somebody does it for me. I learned that I'm in control of my life and how I want to spend my time and who and where I want to spend it with. And now I can make better informed decisions, which I already have because I'm now in a really good place and I love my job and I'm surrounded by people that are great. And I used that seemingly awful experience to help me get to where I am today. So that's just one example of living in the gain. And like I said, it's gratitude driven. So, how can we shift our perspective on our experiences in such a way that is going to impact us for the better? It was cute because I was listening to this book. And so, when you listen to the book, Benjamin Hardy is interviewing Dan Sullivan. These are his concepts that Benjamin is elaborating on in the book. And Dan said, it's inevitable if you're talking to me, I'm going to shift it into the positive. Like, you can't talk to Dan Sullivan without being recalibrated to, nope, let's think of this in a positive aspect instead of the negative. And if we can just practice a small amount of that every day, can you just imagine how much better your life would be? So, there are a couple of actionable steps that you can take to start putting this into practice. One suggestion from the book was to start measuring your gains every day. So, at the end of each day, write down 3 things you accomplished or any progress that you've made, no matter how small. The thing I loved about this practice is it's not just about writing down gratitude, but it's like acknowledging your wins for the day. And then the next step is to make a plan for what are your 3 wins going to be tomorrow so that you go into the next day anticipating that you will continue to win at life, at your goals every single day. Another action you can take is practicing gratitude by shifting your focus from what's missing to what you already have that's moving you closer to your goals. So, another example I loved from the book was how Benjamin Hardy was talking about his kids. And one day they were looking forward to getting a cookie, and mom ended up splitting the cookie and giving some of it to each of the kids. And one of the kids was like, oh, but my piece was smaller than their piece. And they were complaining about it. And I know we can all think of something related to that in our lives, whether it's us or kids in general. But Benjamin reframed it with his son and said, what if you really wanted that cookie and then you actually never got it? Does having the cookie now, no matter how big or small your piece, make you feel good that you actually got to experience that? And so it's this idea of subtracting things from your life and imagining what your life would be without it. And then that makes you more grateful that you actually have it today. So, an interesting concept to consider and maybe try out. Ultimately, living in the gain allows you to celebrate your progress and stay motivated for the future. It's not about perfection, it's about perspective. So if we can make a perspective shift towards the positive, then it's only going to help us keep going and keep moving towards our goals. If this mindset shift resonates with you, I challenge you to spend this week practicing the gain by using one of the exercises I mentioned, or maybe even reading or listening to the actual book. And let me know how it changes your perspective. I would love to hear from you. In addition, I just want you to know that I dive deeper into mindset shifts like this in my one-on-one coaching and on other episodes of this podcast. So if you need support as you are making a career change and working through some of the challenges and struggles, I would love to assist you on your journey. So please reach out to me at shiftyourdayjob@gmail.com or on Instagram at shiftyourdayjob. And let's keep this conversation going. Again, I'm wishing you a happy and warm holiday season, and I appreciate you joining me today.